Hello friends, it's Chari. Today I have a spooky Swivel Surprise card to share with you. So I am making a Halloween Swivel Surprise. I'm going to use some stamps from Fangtastic Friends as well as Booyah, and then one of my favorite sets, Spooktacular, because I love these sentiments. The mixing of the fonts is one of my favorites and I love the size of them. So I'll start by stamping out my images. I have two little bats and the branch from Fangtastic Friends. I also stamped out that little spider from Sweet Spiders, but I did not actually end up using it on my card. For the little ghosts, I'm going to stamp these in some River Rock ink so they're that gray color instead of black. River Rock ink is also Copic friendly, but we get that nice gray outline to give them a bit more of a ghosty look. I'll be stamping their faces after I do my coloring. So for my ghosts, I thought it would be fun to kind of give them a bit of a teal hue to them, kind of like the ghosts that we always see, the cartoon or the merchandise for the Haunted Mansion at Disney. They always have this teal color to them, which I thought would be fun. So I'm using a BG10, a G triple, no, sorry, that's quadruple zero, and then a C double zero to blend things out. So I'm doing most of that greenish color and that BG10 at the bottom. For my bats, I'm using warm grays. So I have that W7, which is my darkest color, and I'm adding the shadows. Then I will blend it out with that W5. And finally, I'll do the W3. I know that, bats are usually black, but I like to use grays so that I don't lose the details of my stamp. I still want to see his cute little face and the lines and details of his wings and his body, and this is the best way to do that. Now, for his ears, I pulled in that W1, but I'm also going to add a little pink to that W1, and now we have that kind of grayish pink color inside the ears. Now for the other bat, I will color it exactly the same, starting with that W7 for my darkest areas, blending out with W5, and then I'll finish with that W3. And I'm really trying to not go over it too much. Again, I want to see that little detail of his face and his wings and his body. And I'll do the same for the ears on this one, starting with the W1 and then a little bit of that R11 pink color. Now I know I said I did not use the spider on my card, but I did decide to leave the coloring in the video just so you can see. I'm using those same W's to color in my spider, but I wanted it to look a little bit different, not just the same as my bats. So I'm actually going to pull in a purple color. So I ended up with the V22. It's pretty light purple and kind of a bluish tone, and it just kind of gives it a different look. It's still a gray spider with a little bit of purple to it. Then of course for my branch I need to color that in. I made some really dark shadows on my leaves and then I'm blending it out with a green. I didn't want it too bright because I'm creating a nighttime scene for my card, so I wanted to keep those leaves nice and dark. And then I will pull in my E20s for the branch. So I have E27. I'm just going to trace along the bottom where the shadow would be. And then I'll blend out with that E25, just some really simple shading. And I decided to add a little more darkness. Like I said, this will be a nighttime scene, so I wanted to darken it up just a little bit, make that shadow a little more prominent. And then here's where I'm stamping the faces on my ghosts. And I'm just using black licorice ink for this. I'm not doing any more coloring over the faces, so I don't need to worry about it being a Copic friendly ink. And then I added some little rosy cheeks to my ghosts. And I'm just blending them out a little bit with that 00. I can use the coordinating dies to cut these out and I'll have those perfectly cut images for my cards. So I'm lining those up and holding them in place with some removable tape. And here are all my cute images for my card. So I'm going to set those aside and I've got a lot of ink blending and prepping to do for the pieces of my card. Now I'm making a Swivel Surprise card today, so I have a side folding card I created from black cardstock. I have two Sugarplum cardstock panels and I'm going to cut both of those down with the largest outside in stitch rectangle. For the one that will go on the front of my card, I'm taking the full moon die and I'm going to line this up and cut this out of this purple panel. This is going to go on the front of my card. And this will give me a circle for my moon to go into. It will just drop down in there and kind of inlay. And I also get that fun stitching detail around the outside. So I'll cut the same moon from some yellow cardstock and that will fit right into that hole that I cut. So here are my two panels. The one with the moon will be the front and the other one will go on the inside of my card. And I need to do some inking on these to make them look like a really fun spooky night sky. So I'm pulling out some Distress Oxides. First, I'm starting with Villainous Potion, which is this dark purple color, and I'm going to go all around the outside edges, pulling that color towards the inside. I do like that I started with a purple cardstock so I don't have to completely cover everything, and you kind of get this like cloudy look because it's not perfect on that purple. Next, I'll pull in black soot and I'm just pulling that right in the edges. It's pretty dark at the moment, but I'll be blending that out to give it that really cool night sky look. And I'll do a little bit at the bottom too. Now the panel that is on the inside, which is this solid panel right here, this is going to be a completely solid panel and then our Swivel Surprise will be on top of it. For the other panel, the bottom doesn't matter quite as much because I will be putting a piece of cardstock down there. But just for consistency, I inked both of them the same. So now I'm to the other panel. I did clean off my mat so I didn't have any black to pull on there just yet. I'm doing the Villainous Potion first, just as I did before on the other one. And like I said, the bottom doesn't matter too terribly much because there'll be some cardstock down there to create a ground. Then I'm coming in with my black to get that spooky sky look. And once I have these looking the way I like, which we're about there, I am going to add some metallic gold splatters. I'm flicking this off of my block so I get really tiny ones to kind of look like stars and give you that shimmer in the sky. And I'm using a lighter gold instead of a very yellow gold so that it has kind of a white look to it. I'm also going to add some black watercolor splatters, which is something I like to do on like a spooky Halloween card. I just think that the two colors of splatters add some really nice texture to a card. Now I need to cut my Swivel Surprise pieces to match my background, or at least this main circle. This is the main one that's in the middle, and I want it to match the background. And you can see there, it really doesn't yet. So I need to ink it just like I did that background panel. So I've cut that from that Sugarplum cardstock. I'm inking it up with the Villainous Potion first, and then I'll add just a little bit of that black soot around the edges. This is where my sentiment is going to go, so I want it to match. I am adding the splatters to this as well. I wasn't sure if I was going to at first, but I really wanted it to look like it was the same as the background. So I just added the same metallic splatters and black splatters, and I'll set this aside and we will white emboss the sentiment on this later. So now for my clouds, these are going to be on the inside where the Swivel Surprise moves around. These are cut from narwhal cardstock, but I want them to have a little bit of definition from each other and a little bit more darkness. So I'm adding some storm cloud ink to the bottom of the clouds. This way they kind of have some dimension, and when I layer them together flat on top of each other, they will stand out from each other a little bit and not look like one giant cloud. These clouds are cut with the clouds from the Spring Showers die set, which is one of my favorites, and I cut 2 of each of the 3 sizes. So we have 2 large clouds, 2 medium clouds, and 2 small clouds. I also wanted to add some shimmer to these, and I thought it would be fun to pull out my Distress Mica stain. This is frozen fog, so it's a really light gray color, and I just gave them a little mist, and I'll let them dry, and they're going to have this fun shimmer. So I'll just set those aside to dry. And I'm moving on to some pieces for the front of my card. So I'm using the Spooky Gate. This is an older die, but I thought this would be a good way to decorate the front of my card with that big moon. I cut these also from the Narwhal cardstock, and I'm using that same Storm Cloud ink to add some shading. And I'm adding the shading on 2 different sides of the posts because they're going to be centered with the moon in the middle, so I wanted the shadow to be on the outside edges of the post. I also inked those little detail pieces that get layered on top. Now I'm back to my moon and I'm adding some inking to it as well so you can kind of see that round shape even better. I'm using dried marigold distress oxide ink, and then I will pull in some wild honey, which is a really pretty yellow orangey color. And this is one of my favorite colors to use for moons like this. I'm also using the nighttime stencil to add those little craters to my moon. Now these are pretty subtle, and when I blended a little more with that ink, I was like, oh, I need a little bit more. So I'm going to line it back up and just add a little bit more. If you wanted it even darker, you could go pull out another darker color of distressing, but I wanted them to stay subtle, but I still wanted them to be seen. So now to move on to the other elements of my Swivel Surprise. I will be cutting the mechanism and that little rectangular piece that's part of the mechanism from black textured canvas cardstock. I'm using the round piece here. This cuts a ring and the inner circle. I want those out of 2 different things. So I cut the inner circle from some sunflower cardstock you see there, and then the ring I'm cutting from some acetate, and I'll be putting a piece of white paper underneath it just to keep it clean in my die cut machine. Now the black textured canvas cardstock. Kelly told us in the intro video that 80-pound cardstock was the sweet spot for this mechanism, but I wanted mine to be a different color, and so she suggested using the textured canvas cardstock because it is not as thick as the smooth cardstock. Now for this yellow circle on the inside, I wanted it to mimic the moon on the outside. So I'm adding the same inking that I did on my moon. So I have my dried marigold and my wild honey, and I'm just adding a little bit of shading to that top edge there. The bottom edge is going to end up hidden. Now I have a piece of rainforest cardstock. I'm kind of moving back to the front here. I'm creating my ground for my gate to be on. So I cut that with that same outside in stitch rectangle, and I'm kind of figuring out how far down I need to trim it. It's definitely taller than I need it to be. And what I decided was I better put my gate together first and then lay that on there and decide how far down to trim that piece of ground. So for my gate, I cut the lanterns from some black glitter cardstock, and I'm just layering that yellow piece behind it so that our lanterns are glowing. You can see I've already assembled the stone pillars there that I inked earlier with that little detail piece that layers on the top. And then I'm gluing my lantern to the back. I am just struggling a little bit just because it's that glitter cardstock. I didn't want to put too much glue, so it's better to just kind of add a little bit more if you need it. And also, I need to just stick it there, set it aside, and just let it dry and have some patience and stop touching things. And you're going to find that my patience with the liquid glue was a struggle this time. So we'll talk about that as we go along. And then I can add the gate. It is just cut from some black smooth cardstock, so nothing fancy with the gate, and I'm just layering it behind the pillars. And I made sure that each of the pillars, the shadow part that I inked is on the outside edge, not the inside where the gate is, because the moon is in the center, as I said before, so my shadow would be on the outside. So now that my gate's together, I can lay this on here and kind of figure out how tall I need that ground or the grassy part at the bottom. I also cut the spooky fence from some of the black textured canvas cardstock, and that's just going to kind of peek out from behind the pillars and finish off the scene so that we don't just have a gate, we have a gate and then the fence that goes out to each side of my panel. So I can layer this at the bottom, and now I have my ground to build my little gate and my fence on. For the fence, I'm just going to trim it down. These pieces that I'm trimming are much longer than I need, but this will allow me to place it and then trim off the excess on the side. And I just decided to leave the little border at the bottom. I know normally that gets hidden underneath the ground, but since the gate had a bottom rung to it, I left this on my fence so that it all matched nicely. Usually I would probably hide that behind the ground line so that you just see the fence poking up, but I thought that this worked with the look of the gate and gave it some consistency. I am going to go ahead and put this panel onto the front of my side folding card that's made from some black cardstock, and this will allow me to glue everything down. Now that I trimmed off that fence, I don't really need to have the edge as a guide anymore, so I can get everything glued down to the front. So I'll add my moon in the center as well. This just inlays inside that circle that was cut out of the purple. And then now I can add my gates and center them up right over that moon. And I'm making sure everything's kind of flat on the front of this card. There's a lot going on the inside of the card, so I didn't feel like the front needed lots of dimension, but I also wanted the front to kind of go with what's on the inside. You're going to see I have my scene here with my ghost and my bat and the big moon, and then on the inside I'm going to have the same thing going on with my swivel surprise. I'll have a ghost, a bat, and a moon. So I've kind of laying everything out, figuring out where I want it to go, and now I can start to glue everything down. And I like the liquid glue. I'm going to shift my gate up a little bit so it's a little more even with my fence rather than too far down. And I like how my gate just barely blocks that giant moon. It really makes it look like it's in the background when I do this. Now I can add my little characters. I thought about putting the ghost in front of the gate with some foam squares, but I decided against it. For the branch here, I'm going to hang it off the side so I can kind of trim it off so it looks like it's much longer than it actually is. Then I can put my little bat up here hanging off of the branch. And I just decided to cover up those leaves with him. And then now for my little ghost. And what I ended up doing was tucking it behind that gate. So I'll just pull up those pieces of the gate a little bit and kind of tuck it down there like it's kind of coming out from the gate, which I think is really cute. And I'll pull that little piece so it's in front. So that's the front of the card. That is all complete, nice, and flat. And now I can move on to the inside. You can see I got a little bit of that frozen fog spray on there accidentally when I sprayed my clouds, but I think it's kind of a cool look on that black cardstock actually, so I am not concerned about it. So I'm adding that panel, the full panel I created earlier. Now for the circle that I created with the inking, we need to add a sentiment. So this is where the Spooktacular set comes in, and I'm going to use the sentiment that says, "You're a fangtastic friend." I just love this stamp set. It's older, but it is one of my favorites, mostly because I love the sentiments, but also the images are really cute too. So I've prepped this with an anti-static powder tool. I'm stamping my sentiment in the center with some clear embossing ink, and I will add some white embossing powder. Then I can heat this up with my heat tool and I'll get that really bright white sentiment on that dark purple, and it's really going to stand out and look great. So now to work on the Swivel Surprise mechanism. I did cut this from the black cardstock, so I know it's really hard to see these score lines, but the die creates some score lines that we need to fold along. So first there is one at the top here, And I'm going to go slow so we can work our way through all of these. Then there is a diagonal. We're going to open this back up. There's a diagonal that goes in the other direction. And when we reinforce this, we're going to have an X. And then there is one that goes right through the center of the X. So we want to fold there, reinforce that, and then we have one more at the end that makes a little tab. This is a little tab that's going to connect to the side of our card and pull it so it works. Then we want to take our fingers and push right at that X, push those folds in and make a little point. It looks like a little house. I'm going to open it up and do it one more time. Push right there. So we have this little house. Then we're going to flip it over to the other side. And it's hard to see the score line, but it's like a roof of a house and a rectangle part at the bottom. That's where we're going to put our adhesive. So you're going to see it better here with the adhesive. We want to put our adhesive below that score line. So I'm pulling over my card that I've put that panel inside that's ready for this. I'm pulling off the liner paper. And what I'm going to do is, with that other tab folded out, we want to make sure it's all flat. We're going to kind of center it up, put the edge right in the fold, and then we're going to press down. So this is going to stick to that back purple panel on my card. And you can kind of test it. You can pull it right now and see how it kind of pops out. And that's exactly what we want it to do. Now that funny looking piece at the top that's kind of rounded, that's where our little circle goes. So in this case, it's the moon. I'm using liquid glue to make sure mine is nice and secure, and I'm going to put a piece of scrap paper underneath it, just slide it right under there. So when I glue this circle down, any stray glue will just get on my scrap paper, and it lines right up with the shape of that black piece that's sticking up. Okay, so that's working well. Now I need to add that acetate ring that I cut earlier. Now it's going to go on this kind of funny shaped piece at the bottom. And since it is cut from acetate, I am using the double-sided tape to adhere that, because liquid glue on that slick acetate would just be pretty messy. So I put two pieces down there. This shape is really funny looking because it lines up with the circle perfectly. And I do need my tweezers to kind of help me pull off that liner paper. But we're going to take the ring and we are going to feed it over this arm that's sticking out to the left. So you want it to go through the ring. We're going to line it up. It's really easy to see when it's acetate. You can see right through it and how perfectly that shape lines up with acetate. And I'm just making sure it's well burnished down. So you can see how that's going to move now. And because I used acetate for the ring rather than solid cardstock, I do need to make sure that I hide my little connection, and that is where my clouds are going to come in. So I'm going to go ahead and put those on here before I do the center part of the Swivel Surprise. So I'm using the double-sided tape since we're using acetate, and I'm starting with one of those large clouds, and I'm just going to carefully cover up that connection piece. Now I need to add a couple more clouds to the bottom here. Now I did make a practice one when I was figuring out how to make the Swivel Surprise, and I added some clouds to it, so I kind of already know the extents they could go. But if you're building something new, just test it as you go and make sure that everything works to where it moves properly. It doesn't impede the fold of the card or stick out when it's pulled in. So you're going to see me push it and test it. It all tucks nicely into the fold of the card. Now we need to move on to this little rectangular piece. There is an X in the top left corner that matches an X on the mechanism and a score line, and we're going to fold this into a little chair shape. We're putting some adhesive just in that little triangle, and we're going to match the two X's up together. I know this is hard to see on black, and I apologize. Now, lessons I learned doing this card. Be patient with your liquid glue. I don't think my glue was quite dry enough when I moved on and started assembling other pieces, and it gave me a little bit of trouble. So learn from my mistakes and just make sure your glue is nice and dry. Now on this little tab that folds up, that is where the big circle in the center where I created the sentiment, that's where that's going to go. And I am sticking this down with some double-sided adhesive tape onto that little tab. And then you just line it up and stick it right in the middle of the ring. So that's where you want to line it up. And then you can check, make sure everything's still moving as it should, looks good. Now it's time to adhere that other little tab, the last little piece of our mechanism, to the other side of the card. So I will put some double-sided tape to the left of the score line, making sure there's no little pieces sticking out. That's what I was trimming off with my scissors. And then what you want to do is you want to push the mechanism in its closed position. So like when the card is closed, then close the card and pick up that adhesive and it will stick to the other side. You can make sure it's nice and stuck down and everything is moving great. So I need to add my other clouds and my images, and you can see how the inside is starting to look like a continuation of the outside of the card. I have my little ghost flying here. I'm adding some more clouds up here so it looks like the moon is peeking out from behind some clouds. And I'm gluing these clouds directly to that purple circle. Now you're going to see something happen here that I did not expect, and my circle just came off. I don't know why the double-sided tape didn't hold like I think it should. Maybe it needed to be burnished down more. Maybe it had to do with the texture of the black cardstock. I'm not sure. But what I decided to do was finish decorating this piece on my desktop, nice and flat. So I need to add my little bat here as well. And actually, that's the only other piece I needed to add. That other little cloud will go up on my moon. Now I'm going to tell you that this didn't work. I thought, let's put a big glue dot. That'll hold a little better than the double-sided tape. What I found with a glue dot, and you can experiment, was that it turned on the dot. So I would close and open my card, and when I opened it, that whole circle had rotated. You can see like it's rotating now. It's not holding it square, even though I'm pressing really hard to make it stick to that dot. It turned, it's not straight anymore. So it kind of acted like a pivot point. So I decided the glue dot is not going to work. And I'm leaving this in so you don't make the same mistakes I did. So I messed with that little connector piece so much that it kind of had lost its integrity a little bit. So I made a new one. I cut this from some Storm Cloud cardstock. I am gluing it right back on, learning that I need to be patient and not move that until the glue is dried. So I'm going to let it dry fully before I add my circle. Now I did add a little bit of anti-static powder tool kind of underneath that acetate circle because it was dragging a little bit. So if you have a little bit of a drag, that's the way to fix that. And since the glue dot definitely didn't work and my double-sided tape seemed to not be my friend today, I used liquid glue. And I'm going to make sure this is nice and stuck down. I'm going to take my tweezers and kind of clamp this together till it dries. And now it's going to work beautifully and be so super cute. You can see this little scene with the clouds and the moon, and it's really cute. I did pull my spider in. I was going to put it on the left side, but then I just thought it just didn't fit with what was going on, so I left him off. So now everything's working great. Look at how fun that Swivel Surprise is. It's so cute. I am really excited about my card. And then I am finishing off with some little die cut glitter stars. These were just in my drawer over here, cut with the Hearts and Stars skinny tag die. Now I'm adding some to the inside, and I want to tell you right now, make sure they are completely glued down because that acetate circle, it slides across the surface and it can catch the star if all those points aren't glued down very nicely. You can see right there, it just did it. So I'm making sure those are glued down nicely so that I don't have any problems. So you're going to see me really push down on those stars, make sure they are nice and stuck down. I did have a couple more sitting here. I thought it would be fun if these kind of continued on to that sort of blank side of the card, kind of like they just spilled over. So here is my finished card. Here's a look at the outside with that big moon. I love it so much. And you open it up and the scene kind of continues. Those clouds swirl around. And I just think it is a really fun, cool look. I love this new interactive die. So I hope this has inspired you to give the Swivel Surprise a try and play with some of your older sets with it as well and make a really fun, cool interactive card. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.